In the humming half-dark of the ICU monitors blinked like tired stars as Elias Walker's fingers hovered over the life support switch. His 8-year-old daughter Audrey lay motionless, drowned in tubes and soft machine breaths. Behind him, the attending physician murmured statistics and no realistic chance, sliding the consent form closer. Elias's vision blurred. His calloused thumb twitched toward the pen. Then a small, trembling hand caught his. A thin boy in a frayed hoodie. Leo, eyes too old for his face, whispered, "Sir, don't turn it off. She's coming back, I swear." And somehow Elias believed him with everything he had. 3 weeks earlier, winter had settled over the mid-sized industrial city like a held breath. Morning fog clung to warehouse districts and the glass face of City General Hospital, a 9-story building that stood between the working-class neighborhoods and the gleaming downtown core. Inside, fluorescent tubes hummed their eternal song, casting hallways in shades of blue-white that made everyone look slightly ill. The ICU occupied the 7th floor, a hushed kingdom where time moved differently, measured not in hours but in heartbeats and the rhythmic sigh of ventilators. Elias Walker was 36 years old, though his hands looked older. Engine grease had stained the creases of his palms permanently, a badge of honor from 15 years as a mechanic. He was tall, broad-shouldered from lifting transmissions and crawling under chassis with a face that was all angles and stubble. His brown eyes carried dark circles from years of single parenthood, but they lit up in ways that surprised people when he talked about his daughter. He worked at Henderson's Auto Repair on the South Side, fixing everything from delivery vans to the occasional vintage Corvette. The pay was modest but steady enough for a small 2-bedroom rental with peeling wallpaper and a kitchen window that looked out onto an alley. Audrey was everything that mattered. 8 years old, she wore her light brown hair in a perpetual ponytail that bounced when she ran, and she ran everywhere. Her yellow backpack, plastered with stickers of unicorns and racing cars, was an extension of her personality, bright cluttered full of surprises. She loved drawing filling notebooks with elaborate plans for their future, a combination bakery and auto repair shop where people could eat cupcakes while waiting for oil changes. "Everyone needs both, Dad," she'd explain with absolute seriousness. "Cars break down and people get hungry. It's perfect." Her mother had been gone for 4 years now. Cancer, the aggressive kind that the doctors caught too late and moved too fast. Since then, Elias had become expert in things he'd never imagined: French braids, reading chapter books with different voices, packing lunches that included vegetables Audrey might actually eat. He'd turned down a job offer from a semi-professional racing team, the kind of opportunity mechanics dream about because it would have meant weekends on the road. Audrey needed him home. He needed her more. They had their rituals, the small ceremonies that made them a family of two. Every night before bed, no matter how tired either of them was, Audrey would take his rough hand in her small one and say, "Tomorrow will be better, Dad." She didn't remember her mother's face anymore. Not really, only the woman in the photographs and the stories Elias told. But she'd inherited that irrepressible optimism, and it kept him going through the lonely evenings and the bills he juggled like a street performer. Across the city, in a neighborhood where the streetlights were always broken and sirens were background music, lived Leo Martinez. At 12, he was all sharp edges and wariness thin in a way that spoke of missed meals rather than metabolism. His dark hair fell into eyes that had seen too much eviction notices taped to doors, his mother crying over hospital bills, the inside of emergency rooms, more often than any child should. He lived with his mother in a studio apartment above a laundromat, where the smell of industrial detergent mixed with mold in a scent he no longer noticed. His hoodie had a broken zipper. His sneakers had holes patched with duct tape. He was learning to be invisible. But Leo's eyes were what marked him. They were old eyes, haunted eyes. 5 years ago, his little sister Emma, only 6 years old, had lain in the ICU at City General with meningitis. The doctors had used gentle words to describe terrible things: quality of life, minimal brain function, the kindest option. His mother, overwhelmed and alone, had signed the papers to withdraw life support. Leo remembered every detail, standing outside the ICU, too young to be allowed inside, watching through glass as they disconnected the tubes. He'd pounded on that glass, screaming that Emma was still breathing, that they had to wait. Just wait a little longer. Nobody had listened. The monitor's flatline beep had become the soundtrack of his nightmares. Since then, Leo avoided hospitals, but he couldn't escape the memories. He spent his days at busy intersections, selling candy bars from a cardboard box, washing windshields for quarters, anything to scrape together money for his mother's medications. She was sick now, too, the same illness eating away at her that the doctors said they could treat if only they had insurance, if only they had money, if only. Leo had learned to read adults in seconds who might be generous, who would curse at him when to disappear. That Tuesday afternoon in early December started ordinary. Elias woke at 5:30, made coffee that tasted like motor oil, and prepared Audrey's lunch with the precision of ritual peanut butter sandwich apple slices in a bag so they wouldn't brown juice box and a yellow sticky note that read, "Proud of you, kiddo." Audrey stumbled out of her room at 6:15, hair everywhere, and climbed into his lap for 3 minutes of quiet before the day started. She ate cereal, chattering about a science project on volcanoes, while Elias packed her backpack and made sure she had her library book. They walked to the bus stop together, and she hugged him hard before climbing aboard. He'd promised to pick her up early, take her for pizza at the place with the arcade games, then let her hang out at the garage while he finished the day's work. It was supposed to be simple. At 2 in the afternoon, his phone rang. Henderson sounded apologetic but desperate. A VIP client, some developer named Zane Holloway, was having a meltdown because his expensive sports car was making a noise Henderson couldn't diagnose. The man was threatening to take his business elsewhere to leave bad reviews, to call his lawyer. "I need you," Henderson said. "You're the only one who can handle this. Just an hour, maybe 90 minutes. Elias looked at the clock, calculating. He called the school arranged for his neighbor's wife to give Audrey a ride home. It would be fine. He'd meet her there. Just this once, he'd be a little late. But the neighbor's wife missed the call, and Audrey waited outside the school, watching car after car pull away until she was alone. She knew the way to her dad's garage. She'd walked it with him on weekends, counted the blocks, knew the landmarks. 8 blocks turn left at the Blue House, 4 more blocks to Henderson's. She could do it. She'd surprise him. She swung her yellow backpack onto her shoulders and started walking, humming the song from music class. Leo was at his usual corner near the intersection of 5th and Harmon, where the light took forever to cycle, and people sometimes felt guilty enough to buy candy or let him squeegee their windshields. He'd made $8.17 enough for tonight's medicine and maybe a can of soup. He noticed the little girl because she glowed too bright, too unafraid, too different from the gray adults hurrying past. She stopped at the crosswalk, bouncing on her toes, waiting for the walk signal, her yellow backpack a spot of sunshine. Zane Holloway was in a mood. Lunch had included 2 glasses of wine, enough to smooth his edges, but not enough that he felt drunk. His phone buzzed constantly texts about the hospital fundraiser he was headlining tomorrow, details about the donation ceremony reporters who wanted quotes. He glanced at the screen as he drove his sleek black sports car through the intersection approaching 5th and Harmon. The light ahead turned yellow. He had plenty of time. He accelerated, eyes still on his phone, confident in his reflexes and his right to be in a hurry. Audrey saw the walk signal illuminate. She stepped off the curb. The impact sounded like the world breaking. Metal met flesh, glass exploded into glitter, and a small body flew through the air in a terrible arc before hitting the pavement with a sound Leo would hear in his sleep forever. For a moment, everything stopped, sound, breath, time itself. Then, Leo was running his candy bars, forgotten his feet carrying him toward the yellow backpack and the 2 still girls sprawled in a spreading pool of red. Blood. So much blood. Audrey's face was white. Her eyes closed, one arm bent wrong. Leo dropped to his knees beside her hands, shaking so hard he could barely touch her. But her chest moved, shallow, labored, but moving. "Please," he whispered to no one and everyone. "Please hold on." Zane Holloway stumbled from his car, face drained of color. For 3 seconds he stood there looking at what he'd done. Then his phone rang and he answered it. A man in an expensive suit emerged from the passenger side, assessed the situation with cold efficiency, and grabbed Zane's arm. "You need to leave," the man said, quietly, urgently. "Right now. We'll handle this." Zane let himself be pulled away from the girl, away from responsibility into a waiting car that drove off before the sirens started their wail. Leo memorized it all. The car, black, sporty, expensive. The license plate, he repeated it in his head like a prayer. The man's face, jowly gray hair, expensive watch. The name he heard whispered, Holloway. Zane Holloway. When the ambulance arrived, paramedics swarmed with controlled urgency. Leo backed away, blood on his hands and knees as they immobilized Audrey's neck and lifted her onto a stretcher. "Do you know her?" someone asked. Leo shook his head, throat too tight for words. They loaded her into the ambulance siren screaming and left Leo alone in an intersection that suddenly felt like a crime scene, staring at the abandoned yellow backpack lying in a puddle of blood. 20 minutes later, Elias Walker's life ended and restarted in the space of a phone call. He was under a Lexus socket wrench in hand when his phone rang. The police officer's voice was professional, practiced gentle in the way that meant something terrible had happened. "Mr. Walker, there's been an accident involving your daughter, Audrey. She's been transported to City General Hospital. You should come immediately." The wrench fell from his hand, clanging against concrete. Elias didn't remember getting out from under the car, didn't remember telling Henderson, didn't remember driving. He only remembered arriving at the intersection first, seeing it closed off, seeing the blood on the pavement and the yellow backpack being placed into an evidence bag, and seeing a thin boy standing on the sidewalk, hands red, staring at nothing. "Where is she?" Elias's voice came out wrong, too loud, breaking. "Where's my daughter?" Leo flinched but managed to point toward the hospital 4 blocks away. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Elias ran. He left his truck in the middle of the street and ran, lungs burning, vision tunneling, ran until he burst through the emergency room doors and demanded to know where they'd taken his little girl. The ICU became his universe. Audrey lay in a bed too big for her, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed and breathed for her. Tubes snaked from her arms, her chest, her mouth. Wires connected her to monitors that displayed information Elias couldn't interpret. Numbers, wavy lines, colors that shifted from green to yellow to red. Her head was wrapped in bandages, her face swollen and bruised. She looked tiny and broken and impossibly far away, even though he was holding her hand. Dr. Amanda Collins was the one who explained it. She was young for an attending physician, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes that held both competence and compassion. She pulled up a chair beside Elias and showed him the scan's gray images of Audrey's brain that looked like weather maps of a storm. "Severe traumatic brain injury," she said, her voice steady and gentle. "We had to relieve pressure from the swelling, and we've managed to control the internal bleeding, but the damage to her brain is extensive. But she'll wake up." It wasn't a question. Elias needed it to be true. Amanda's pause said everything. "We'll do everything we can. But you need to understand the severity. She's in a coma. The brain injury affects multiple regions. The statistics for this type of injury..." She trailed off, then tried again. "You should prepare yourself for all possibilities." Prepare yourself, as if he could prepare for the death of his child, as if preparation made it bearable. Elias didn't leave. He took up residence in the chair beside Audrey's bed, holding her hand, talking to her about everything and nothing. He told her about the cars in the garage, about the time she'd insisted on helping him change oil and gotten it in her hair. He read her favorite books, his voice cracking on happy endings he no longer believed in. He played the music she loved on his phone, hoping the familiar melodies might reach wherever she was trapped. The bills started arriving on the 4th day. Elias opened them with hands that shook: ICU bed charges, surgical fees, specialists, medications, supplies. The numbers climbed into the tens of thousands, heading toward 6 figures. His insurance would cover some of it, maybe half, maybe less. The rest was debt that would bury him. Henderson called, sympathetic but firm. "Take the time you need, but I can't hold your position open indefinitely. We're short-staffed." On the 6th day, Leo appeared. He'd been haunted by Audrey's face, by the déjà vu of seeing another child drowning in tubes and machines. He'd bribed a janitor with $5 to get past security, then slipped through corridors until he found the ICU. Through the glass wall, he saw Elias slumped beside the bedhead, in his hands defeated. Leo couldn't go in, but he sat in the waiting area, and when he had to leave, he placed a candy bar on the chair, a cheap gesture that felt like the only prayer he knew how to offer. He came back the next night and the next. Sometimes he sat in the waiting area. Sometimes, when security was distracted, he slipped into Audrey's room and sat in the corner, whispering apologies to a girl who couldn't hear him. "I should have pulled you back. I should have yelled louder. I should have done something." He told her about Emma, about the machines shutting down, about how he'd failed once and couldn't live with failing again. On the 8th day, Clinton Rhodes entered the picture. The hospital administrator was a man in his 50s who wore expensive suits and spoke in the smooth language of corporate efficiency. He called it resource allocation. He called it difficult conversations. What he meant was that Audrey was expensive, her prognosis was poor, and the ICU bed she occupied could serve someone with better chances. Dr. Amanda Collins found herself trapped between medicine and reality. She'd gone into this field to save lives, but she'd also learned the brutal calculus of the ICU: limited beds, unlimited suffering families financially destroyed for outcomes that never improved. She'd held the hands of parents who'd kept their children on life support for months, only to watch them die anyway, bankrupt and broken. But she'd also seen miracles, the impossible recoveries that made her believe in something beyond statistics. Audrey haunted her. The scans were bad, yes, but not uniformly terrible. The girl's vitals remained stable. There were moments when Amanda thought, though, she couldn't prove that Audrey responded to her father's voice. Small things, a change in heart rate, a flicker of eye movement beneath closed lids. But Clinton was pushing, and the ethics committee was starting to murmur about futile care and quality of life. On the 10th night, they brought Elias into a conference room. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The table was long and polished, the chairs uncomfortable. Clinton was there, along with Amanda, a hospital attorney, and a woman from the billing department who looked embarrassed to exist. Clinton did most of the talking, his voice modulated for compassion he didn't quite feel. "Mr. Walker, nobody wants to have this conversation, but we have to be realistic about Audrey's condition. The brain damage is catastrophic. Even in the best-case scenario, if she were to wake up, and I have to stress that's unlikely, the neurological deficits would be profound. She would never live independently, never have a normal life. And the financial burden both to you and to your family of maintaining life support indefinitely." He let that hang in the air like smoke. A piece of paper appeared on the table, white crisp covered in small print and one large signature line. Authorization to withdraw life-sustaining treatment. "We're not asking you to give up," Clinton continued, though that was exactly what he was asking. "We're asking you to consider what's merciful, to let her go peacefully with dignity, surrounded by love." Elias stared at the paper. The words blurred into meaningless shapes. All he could see was Audrey's face when she smiled the way she'd grab his hand every night and promise tomorrow would be better. "What if there's still a chance?" His voice came out as a whisper. "What if she can still come back?" Amanda wanted desperately to say yes to promise hope, but 12 years of medical training and experience told her to be honest. The chance of meaningful recovery is very small, less than 5%, possibly much less. But not zero. The silence in the room was its own answer. "I need time," Elias said. I need more time." They gave him 24 hours, but they left the form with him and it sat in his jacket pocket like a gun he couldn't bring himself to use. Leo had been watching, learning the rhythms of the ICU shift changes, security rotations, when he could slip in unseen. That night, while Elias was in the cafeteria forcing himself to eat something, Leo crept into Audrey's room. He sat beside her bed, this girl he'd never spoken to but felt responsible for, and he talked. "I know you're in there somewhere. I know it's dark and scary and you can't find your way back, but your dad needs you. He's about to give up and I can't let that happen again." He talked about her yellow backpack, about pizza and garages and dreams of bakeries. And as he spoke, something changed on the monitor, a spike in heart rate, a shift in the brainwave patterns. Leo's breath caught. "That's it," he whispered, leaning closer. "You hear me? You're fighting. Don't stop fighting." When Elias returned and found a strange boy in his daughter's room, his first reaction was anger fueled by exhaustion and fear. "Who the hell are you? You can't be in here." Leo stood trembling, ready to bolt. But something made him speak the truth. "I saw the accident. I was there when the car hit her. I stayed with her until the ambulance came." His voice cracked. "I had a little sister. The doctor said there was no hope and my mom signed the papers to turn off the machines. But I think I know Emma could have made it if they'd just waited longer. I can't watch them do it again. I can't lose someone else because the hospital decided she wasn't worth saving." The raw anguish in the boy's voice stopped Elias cold. He saw his own terror reflected in those two old eyes, the helplessness of watching someone you love slip away while others made the decisions. "What's your name?" "Leo." A long pause. Then, "You can come back, during visitor hours, but don't touch anything, and if anyone asks, your family." By the 12th day, the pressure became unbearable. Henderson fired Elias. He had a business to run. He couldn't wait indefinitely. The hospital's ethics committee scheduled a formal review. Clinton set a hard deadline. If there was no significant improvement by tomorrow, the committee would recommend withdrawing life support with or without parental consent. But Dr. Irene Porter, a neurologist with a reputation for cold precision, reviewed Audrey's case and found something everyone else had missed. She spent 2 hours going through every scan, every EEG reading, every test result. Unlike Amanda's gentle explanations, Irene spoke in blunt facts. "This child is not brain dead," she told Amanda and Elias. "She's in a minimally conscious state. There's activity. The EEG shows patterns inconsistent with a vegetative state. It's subtle, it's inconsistent, but it's there." "Can she recover?" Elias asked, afraid to hope. "I don't know. But anyone who tells you recovery is impossible is guessing based on statistics, not on your daughter specifically. She deserves more time, more tests. This is not a hopeless case." But Clinton overruled her. "We can't keep a valuable ICU bed occupied based on possibilities. The committee meets tomorrow morning. We'll make our recommendation then." That evening, Leo overheard 2 nurses talking. "Poor kid in 7. They're pulling the plug tomorrow. Father's finally signing the papers." Panic seized him. Not again, not when he'd seen her respond, not when she was still fighting. He ran from the hospital through streets slick with rain until he found the legal aid office where Helen Brooks worked late most nights. Helen was 37, sharp-eyed, with the exhausted determination of someone who fought battles she usually lost but refused to stop fighting. She'd been a corporate lawyer once, then quit after defending a hospital against a malpractice suit she knew was justified. Now she worked for the people who couldn't afford lawyers, which meant everyone. Leo burst into her office, breathless and soaked. "They're going to kill her tomorrow. Audrey Walker. And the man who hit her is rich and walked away and nobody's doing anything." Helen listened. She'd seen this story before in variations: poor families pressured into impossible decisions, while wealthy families bought time with money and influence. "Tell me everything," she said. Leo described the accident in detail, the black sports car, the license plate. He'd memorized the name Zane Holloway, the man in the suit pulling him away. Helen's expression hardened. She knew that name. Zane Holloway was a real estate developer with city council connections and his name on a wing of City General Hospital. He was the kind of man who didn't face consequences. Helen spent the night making calls, pulling favors, reviewing police reports that were suspiciously vague about the vehicle involved. She found it finally security footage from a convenience store near the intersection. Grainy, but clear enough. Zane Holloway's car. The impact. Zane stumbling from the driver's seat, another man pulling him away. Everything Leo had described caught on camera. The next morning, as dawn broke gray and cold, Elias sat beside Audrey's bed with the consent form in his hands. Amanda had brought it to him at midnight, tears in her own eyes. "I'm sorry," she'd whispered. "They're making me ask one more time." The pen was in his hand now. He'd been holding it for an hour, staring at the signature line. Every rational part of him understood what the doctors were saying, the statistics, the costs, the likelihood that he was prolonging her suffering rather than saving her life. But rationality felt like betrayal. Signing this paper felt like murdering hope itself. He stood, walked to the ventilator. The machine that breathed for her kept her alive. His hand reached toward it, not to turn it off, but hovering there as if the machine itself might tell him what to do. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The respirator sighed its mechanical breath, and Elias thought about tomorrow, about whether there would be a tomorrow worth having if Audrey wasn't in it. The door burst open. Leo crashed through it, security guard shouting behind him. The boy didn't slow, just grabbed Elias's arm with both hands, his face fierce and terrified. "Sir, don't turn it off. She's coming back. I swear she is." Elias looked down at the small hands gripping his arm, looked at Leo's eyes blazing with certainty and desperation. And he remembered Audrey's hands taking his. Every night, remembered her promise that tomorrow would be better. Remembered that sometimes children know truths that adults have lost the ability to see. He stepped back from the ventilator, let the pen fall from his hand. "No," he said, voice steady for the first time in days. "I won't do it. I can't kill my daughter's last chance because statistics say it's unlikely. She's still fighting. I can feel it." Security tried to remove Leo, but Elias stopped them. "He stays." The next 8 hours were chaos. Helen arrived at the hospital with her evidence with Leo as witness and cornered Clinton in his office. "Zane Holloway caused that accident. He fled the scene, and given that he's your largest donor, I'm guessing you already knew." She placed a thumb drive on his desk. "This contains video footage proving everything. You're going to stop pressuring that family to withdraw life support, or I'm taking this to every news outlet in the state. You can explain why you protected a hit-and-run driver while coercing his victim's family into pulling the plug." Clinton's face drained of color. "You can't prove we knew. I can prove the hit-and-run, and when the press starts investigating why the hospital ethics committee rushed to judgment on a poor family while protecting a wealthy donor, that story has legs." That afternoon, Zane Holloway stood in the hospital's main atrium, surrounded by cameras and reporters and board members preparing to give a speech about his latest donation. Helen walked in with Leo and a laptop. She waited until Zane was mid-sentence about responsibility to the community before standing. "Mr. Holloway, can you comment on the 8-year-old girl you hit with your car 13 days ago?" She played the video. On the screen, mounted on the wall in front of everyone who mattered, the truth unfolded in grainy security footage. The car. The impact. The girl's body flying. Zane fleeing. The room erupted, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, board members turning to stare at Clinton with dawning horror. Upstairs in the ICU, alarms began shrieking. Audrey's monitors spiked heart rate, jumping brainwave patterns surging in ways they hadn't since the accident. Nurses rushed in, calling for doctors. Dr. Irene arrived, running Amanda behind her. Elias had been standing at the window, staring down at the chaos in the atrium. Now he spun around. "What's happening?" "She's waking up," Irene said, and her voice held wonder. "Her brain activity is increasing. She's actually trying to wake up." Leo and Helen burst into the room, breathless from running up 7 flights of stairs. Leo pushed past everyone to Audrey's side, took her hand the way he'd taken Elias's hand the night before. "See?" His voice broke. "She's fighting. She never stopped fighting." Audrey's eyelids fluttered. Her fingers twitched. Her lips moved, and though the tube prevented speech, they could read the word she was trying to form, "Dad." Then her eyes opened, unfocused, confused, but unmistakably open and alive and seeing. Elias collapsed beside the bed, sobbing, holding his daughter's hand as she looked at him and knew him, and came back from wherever she'd been lost. The weeks that followed rewrote several lives. Zane Holloway was arrested within hours, charged with vehicular assault, driving under the influence, and fleeing the scene of an accident. His lawyers tried to bargain, but the video was damning, and the public outrage intense. Clinton Rhodes was suspended pending investigation, and the hospital's board launched a review of how they handled cases involving poor families versus wealthy donors. An anonymous donor, later revealed to be a coalition of citizens moved by the news coverage, established a fund that covered Audrey's medical bills and created a program to help other families facing similar impossible choices. Audrey's recovery was not miraculous in the fairy tale sense. It was slow, painful, marked by setbacks and small victories. She had to relearn how to speak clearly, how to walk without stumbling, how to use her left hand that didn't quite work the way it used to. But she laughed again. She drew pictures again. She made plans for bakeries and garages and tomorrows. Leo's mother died 3 months later, quietly in hospice care, holding her son's hand. The media attention had brought resources, comfort, care, dignity she'd never had before. Leo sat with her until the end, and this time there were no machines keeping her alive artificially, no committee deciding if she was worth saving. It was peaceful. It was right. Afterward, Leo had nowhere to go. Elias found him sitting in the hospital chapel, staring at a stained glass window without seeing it. "You saved my daughter's life," Elias said, sitting beside him. "Twice. Once at the intersection, once in the ICU. And I can't let you face the world alone. You have a home with us if you want it. A family." Leo looked at him, disbelieving. "You mean it?" "Tomorrow will be better," Elias said, using Audrey's nightly promise. "But only if we face it together." 6 months later, 3 people walked past City General Hospital on a spring afternoon when the air smelled like rain and fresh grass. Elias held the hands of 2 children, Audrey walking carefully but steadily, and Leo wearing new sneakers and a hoodie that actually zipped. They paused beneath the 7th-floor windows, looking up at the ICU where everything had nearly ended. "We didn't turn it off," Leo said quietly. "And you came back." Audrey squeezed his hand, then looked at her father. "Tomorrow will be better, Dad." And in that moment, standing in the shadow of the place that had almost become a tomb, but had instead become a crucible, they believed it. Because sometimes when the whole world tells you to give up, when science and statistics and well-meaning experts all agree there's no hope left, all you need is one person who refuses to accept it, one small hand refusing to let go, one voice saying, "Don't turn it off, not yet, not while there's still a chance, one more tomorrow worth fighting for." The world needs more people who refuse to flip the switch, who stand between the dying light and darkness, who believe that miracles sometimes wear the face of a stubborn father and a poor boy with nothing to lose and everything to give. Elias had almost forgotten that. A 12-year-old kid with holes in his shoes and scars on his heart had to remind him that hope isn't foolish, giving up too soon is. Now they walked forward together, this family forged in fluorescent half-light and impossible circumstances toward all the tomorrows they'd almost lost, ready to face whatever came next. Together.